Tell me about a time you received feedback and improved. Introduction. This is a common behavioral interview question for software developers, backend developers, full-stack developers, senior developers, and team leads. Interviewers ask this question to understand how you respond to feedback, how you are coachable, how you can improve from mistakes, how you handle code review comments, how you improve communication or delivery habits, how you avoid being defensive, how you turn feedback into action. This question is especially important for check Java developers, check backend developers, check Spring Boot developers, check full-stack developers, check junior software developers, check senior software developers, check team leads, check Agile teams. The best way to answer this question is by using the STAR method. STAR means S, situation, explain the background. T, task, explain your responsibility. A, action, explain what you personally did. R, result, explain the final outcome. A good interview answer usually spends 10% situation, 10% task, 60% action, 20% result. The most important part is the action section because interviewers want to understand how you accepted the feedback and what you changed afterward. Question. Tell me about a time you received feedback and improved. Example 1. Receiving feedback about pull request size situation. In one sprint, I submitted a pull request for a backend feature. The pull request included API changes, validation logic, database changes, tests, and some unrelated cleanup. The feature worked, but the pull request was large and difficult to review. Task. A senior developer gave me feedback that the pull request should have been smaller and more focused. My responsibility was to understand the feedback and improve how I prepared pull requests in the future. Action. I listened to the feedback instead of defending the size of the pull request. The senior developer explained that large pull requests increase review time, create merge conflict risk, and make it harder to identify issues. I reviewed my pull request and realized that I had mixed feature work with cleanup work. To improve, I changed my approach. For future stories, I split work into smaller pull requests when possible. For example, one pull request for database changes, one pull request for API implementation, one pull request for tests, one pull request for cleanup or refactoring. I also started writing clearer pull request descriptions. My descriptions included: what changed, why it changed, how it was tested, impacted APIs, screenshots or sample responses when useful, known risks. Result: my pull requests became easier to review. Review comments became more focused. The team could merge changes faster, with less confusion. This feedback helped me improve my development workflow and team collaboration. Why this answer works. This answer is strong because it shows kick accepting feedback, improving pull request quality, reducing review effort, team collaboration, delivery improvement, no defensiveness. Example 2. Receiving feedback about test coverage situation. In one project, I completed a backend feature with complex validation rules. The code worked for the main happy path, but during code review, a teammate pointed out that my test coverage did not include enough edge cases. Task. My responsibility was to improve the test coverage and make sure the feature was safe for release. Action. I first reviewed the feedback carefully. The teammate explained that the feature had several failure scenarios, and only testing the successful flow was not enough. I went back to the requirement and listed the important scenarios. I added tests for yes, valid request, missing required field, invalid status, duplicate business key, unauthorized user, optional field missing, downstream service failure, unexpected exception. I also added regression tests for a few edge cases that QA had previously found in similar features. After that, I updated the pull request and asked the reviewer to check again. For future work, I started thinking about test cases earlier during development instead of adding them at the end. Result: the feature had stronger test coverage. QA found fewer issues during testing. I also improved my habit of considering failure scenarios and edge cases early in the development process. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows C. Coachability. C. Test coverage improvement. C. Edge case thinking. C. Code review learning. C. Quality mindset. C. Better future habit. Example 3. Receiving feedback about communication in stand-up situation. In one Agile team, I was working on a backend integration task. I was making progress, but I did not always mention small blockers during daily stand-up because I thought I could resolve them myself. Later, the team told me that those blockers affected planning and testing visibility. Task. My responsibility was to improve how I communicated progress and blockers during the sprint. Action. I accepted the feedback and understood that Agile stand-up is not only about personal progress. It helps the whole team understand delivery risk. I changed how I gave stand-up updates. Instead of saying only what I completed, I started sharing what I completed yesterday, what I plan to complete today, what might become a blocker, who I was waiting on, whether QA or front-end teams were impacted, whether the sprint goal was at risk. I also started updating Jira tickets with short comments when there were dependency risks. If I was blocked by another service or environment issue, I raised it earlier instead of waiting. Result. The team had better visibility into my work. QA and front-end developers could plan around dependencies earlier. The Scrum Master also had better information to help remove blockers. This improved sprint communication and reduced last-minute surprises. Why this answer works. This answer is strong because it shows. Check. Accepting communication feedback. Check. Agile maturity. Check. Raising blockers early. Check. Team awareness. Check. Sprint visibility. Check. Continuous improvement. Example 4. Receiving feedback about overcomplicating a design situation. In one project, I designed a solution for a new reporting feature. My initial design included several extension points for possible future requirements. During design review, a teammate gave feedback that the solution might be more complex than the current business need required. Task. My responsibility was to reassess the design and balance future flexibility with current delivery needs. Action. I listened to the feedback and reviewed the actual requirements again. The teammate's point was valid. The business needed a simple first version, and some of the extension points I added were not required yet. I simplified the design by focusing on the immediate use case. I kept clear API contract, required validation, report generation logic, audit logging, basic status tracking, tests for current behavior. I removed unnecessary abstractions that were not needed for the first release. However, I still avoided hard-coding assumptions that would block future improvements. I also documented possible future enhancements instead of building them immediately. Result. The design became simpler and easier to implement. The feature was delivered faster. The team appreciated that the solution met current needs without unnecessary complexity. I learned to be more careful about avoiding over-engineering. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows. Accepting design feedback, avoiding over-engineering, balancing current and future needs, simplicity, technical maturity, delivery awareness. Example 5. Receiving feedback about error handling situation. In one backend feature, I added error handling for a new API. During code review, a teammate pointed out that some error responses were too generic and not consistent with the rest of the application. My responsibility was to improve the error handling, so the API was easier for front-end and QA teams to use. Action. I reviewed the existing error response standard in the project. I noticed that other APIs returned structured error responses with error codes, messages, timestamps, and field-level details. My implementation returned a generic error message in some cases. I updated the error handling to include consistent error code, user-friendly message, field-level validation errors, timestamp, correlation ID, proper HTTP status code. I also made sure internal exception details were not exposed to users. Then I updated the tests to verify the error response format. I also shared the updated error examples with the front-end and QA teams. Result: the API error handling became consistent with the rest of the application. Front-end integration became easier. QA could validate error scenarios more clearly. I improved my habit of checking existing project standards before implementing new error handling. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows: 1. Receiving code review feedback. 2. Standardization. 3. Secure error handling. 4. Front-end QA awareness. 5. Improving project consistency. Example 6. Receiving feedback about documentation situation. In one project, I completed a backend integration with another internal service. The code was working, but during review, a teammate mentioned that the integration details were not documented clearly. This made it harder for future developers to troubleshoot or modify the integration. Task: my responsibility was to improve the documentation and make the integration easier to support. Action: I accepted the feedback and reviewed what information would help future developers. I added documentation that included downstream service name, endpoint used, request example, response example, timeout configuration, retry behavior, error handling, test data, common failure scenarios, troubleshooting steps. I also added comments only where the logic was not obvious. I avoided adding unnecessary comments for simple code. For future integrations, I started adding a small technical note as part of the story completion. Result: the integration became easier for the team to understand and support. Future troubleshooting was faster because developers had clear reference information. I learned that good documentation is part of maintainability, not an extra task. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows accepting documentation feedback, maintainability improvement, support mindset, integration clarity, team benefit, long-term ownership. Example 7. Receiving feedback about logging too much information situation. In one feature, I added detailed logs to help troubleshoot a difficult API issue. During code review, a teammate pointed out that some logs included too much request information. There was a risk of logging sensitive data. Task: my responsibility was to improve the logging so it remained useful for debugging but safer for production. Action: I reviewed the log statements and removed unnecessary request payload details. I replaced them with safer, structured logs. The updated logs included correlation ID, operation name, error code, status, timing information, safe business identifier where appropriate. I also made sure sensitive fields were not logged. I updated the error logs so they were useful internally without exposing private information. After that, I reviewed the team's logging standard and started following it more carefully in future stories. Result: the logs became safer and more consistent. Production troubleshooting remained possible using correlation IDs and error codes. The feedback helped me become more security aware when adding logs. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows: check, receiving security-related feedback. Check, secure logging. Check, sensitive data protection. Check, production awareness. Check, improving habits. Example 8. Receiving feedback about asking questions earlier situation. In one sprint, I worked on a story with unclear acceptance criteria. I made some assumptions and started implementation. Later, QA and the product owner clarified that one business rule was different from my assumption. This caused rework. Task: my responsibility was to learn from the feedback and improve how I handled unclear requirements. Action: the feedback from the team was that I should raise requirement questions earlier instead of assuming. I accepted that feedback because the rework could have been avoided. For future stories, I started reviewing acceptance criteria more carefully before coding. I began asking questions such as: SOC, what is the expected behavior for this edge case? SOC. Is this field required or optional? SOC. Who is allowed to perform this action? SOC. What should happen for invalid input? SOC. What should the user see when no data is found? SOC. Are there any reporting or audit requirements? I also started adding unclear questions directly to the story so the product owner and QA could respond. During refinement sessions, I became more active in identifying gaps. Result: requirement-related rework decreased. Stories became clearer before development started. QA testing became smoother because acceptance criteria were better defined. The feedback helped me improve my requirement clarification habit. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows, learning from feedback, requirement clarification, product owner collaboration, QA alignment, reducing rework, agile improvement. Best short answer version. If you need a short interview answer, you can say, in one sprint, I submitted a pull request for a backend feature that included API changes, validation logic, database changes, tests, and some unrelated cleanup. The feature worked, but a senior developer gave me feedback that the pull request was too large and difficult to review. I listened to the feedback and realized they were right. I had mixed feature work with cleanup work, which increased review effort and made the change harder to understand. After that, I changed my approach. I started creating smaller, focused pull requests when possible. For example, I separated database changes, API implementation, tests, and cleanup work. I also improved my pull request descriptions by explaining what changed, why it changed, how I tested it, and what areas were impacted. As a result, my pull requests became easier to review, comments became more focused, and the team could merge changes faster with less confusion. Common mistakes to avoid. 1. Saying, I don't usually get feedback. Bad answer. I usually do good work, so I do not get much feedback. Better answer. Choose a real example where feedback helped you improve. 2. Sounding defensive. Bad answer. They gave feedback, but I still think my way was better. Better answer. I listened, understood the reason, and changed my approach. 3. Choosing a weak example. Bad answer. They told me to fix formatting. Better answer. Choose feedback about code quality, testing, communication, design, documentation, or requirements. 4. No improvement. Bad answer. I received feedback and fixed that one issue. Better answer. I changed my future approach so the same issue did not repeat. 5. Blaming others. Bad answer. The requirement was unclear, so it was not really my fault. Better answer. I learned to ask clarification questions earlier when acceptance criteria are unclear. Best practices for answering this question. Check. Use the STAR method. Choose feedback that shows growth. Be honest but professional. Do not sound defensive. Explain what the feedback was. Explain why it was useful. Explain what you changed. Show long-term improvement. Mention team impact. End with what you learned. What interviewers are looking for. Interviewers want to see whether you can accept feedback professionally, improve from feedback, avoid defensiveness, learn from mistakes, change your habits, improve code quality, improve communication, become more effective over time, work well in a team. For senior roles, they also want to see self-awareness, humility, continuous improvement, ownership, maturity, openness to different perspectives, ability to model good behavior for others. Strong words to use in your answer. You can use words like listened, understood, reflected, improved, adjusted, changed my approach, applied the feedback, followed up, became more consistent, reduced rework, improved quality. Example: I listened to the feedback, understood the impact on the team, changed my approach for future work, and followed up by making my pull requests smaller and easier to review. Good feedback and improvement topics you can use. Depending on your experience, you can talk about pull request size, test coverage, stand-up communication, overcomplicated design, error handling, documentation, logging sensitive information, asking questions earlier, code formatting standards, deployment notes, API contract clarity, requirement clarification, front-end back-end alignment, response, estimation, accuracy, final, summary. Tell me about a time you received feedback and improved is an important interview question because software developers must be coachable and continuously improve. The best answer should include what feedback you received, who gave the feedback, why the feedback mattered, how you responded, what action you took, how your behavior changed later, what result improved, what you learned. Good examples include COP, pull request size feedback, COP, test coverage feedback, COP, communication feedback, COP, design simplicity feedback, COP, error handling feedback, COP, documentation feedback, COP, secure logging feedback, COP, requirement clarification feedback. The strongest answers show humility, self-awareness, coachability, ownership, and continuous improvement.